Hi there and welcome. Jonathan here. These talks are offered freely so that no one is ever denied access to these practices. Your support makes a big difference. If you feel inspired to make a donation, please go to jonathanfoust.com. Thank you. It's been said that these practices are spiritual but not religious. They're people of all different faiths are attracted to these practices because they're so powerful. They're so effective. There's a phrase you may have heard called the Jubu, which are Jewish Buddhists, people with Jewish backgrounds who are drawn to this practice. And I ran across a few sharings from the Jubus, the Jewish Buddhists. Deep inside you are 10,000 flowers. Each flower blossoms 10,000 times. Each blossom has 10,000 petals. You might want to see a specialist. Be aware of your body. Be aware of your perceptions. Keep in mind that not every physical sensation is a symptom of a terminal illness. Accept misfortune as a blessing. Do not wish for perfect health or life without problems. What would you talk about? And that leads to another phrase, which I don't know if it comes from that school, but it's sort of the theme of this talk, and that is that it's easier to ride a horse in a direction it's already going. There's always this question, why do you practice meditation? For some, it's to be a little happier. For some, it's to have a little bit less stress. And for others, it's about being more awake and the possibility of being fully awake. The word enlightenment gets thrown around a lot. And I like this definition. A good friend of mine, a depth practitioner, he says that enlightenment is simply the absence of desire. And I like that when I try that on. In the absence of desire, something quite magical and mystical arises. From a stricter kind of Buddhist perspective, it's not just the freedom of desire. There's a whole teaching around the three poisons. These three energies or mind states that make it impossible to be present. And that includes desire, or greed, and it also includes aversion or hatred, and delusion or confusion. So I'd like to talk tonight a little bit about non-attachment. Non-attachment is something that's wonderful to aspire to, but it's complicated because there are states that look like non-attachment, but they really aren't. And it's really easy to get attached to non-attachment. So this is about non-attachment to non-attachment. How do you cultivate a state of non-desire without being attached to it? So four things I'd like to explore. The first is just to review these three poisons, because it's really helpful to recognize them. The second is to look a little bit closer at greed and desire, because that's a major force. And the third, to explore what it means to let go or to let be in your life. And fourth, to explore the question, how the heck do you live in the world cultivating non-attachment? So I'm just back from 3 weeks in Europe, which was a blast. A week or so in Paris, a week or so in Switzerland, and some time in the Netherlands, leading a 4-day retreat. And Tara and I planned this a long time ago. You have to set up these retreats, years in advance. And back then, I was really up for it. Leading a retreat is always fun. I had some time to hang out with friends in Paris, and we love being in beautiful areas, being out in nature. It was too early in the season to get access to the really high trails, but all the spring flowers are blooming in the Alps, and it's supposed to be really, really cool. But every time when I go on a big trip, right on schedule, right before, I was thinking, why am I doing this? Everything I need is right here. Why am I going to this whole effort? I know that it's not necessarily going to make me happy. And of course, I'm vegan. How am I going to be vegan in Europe? Particularly with my 2 maniac friends I'm going to be spending time with. The first leg of my trip was in Paris with a friend, Michael, who was here in class a while back, and another friend, David, who is the CEO of a company called Pana, and they make an amazing cooking app, like a really high-end cooking app, and he's also coming out with some television shows on cooking. They're maniac foodies, and I don't think I'm exaggerating to say they're also out-of-control gluttons. And Michael and I were born in the same year, just a day and a half apart. And we've known each other since we were 19 in a poetry writing class. And this was our 60th birthday, so Paris seemed like a cool place. And I'm fluent in French, and Michael started studying French a while ago, and he's quite proficient. So having this time with them was always interesting. But I have to give you a little story of how I have to practice non-attachment around these guys. Every year we get together for a weekend, and oftentimes it's here in D.C., and the year before was in Colorado, where Michael lives. So I flew out, we immediately drove out, and we're hiking at 10,000 feet, and I was dehydrated and tired, and these guys love to eat and drink, and I'm vegan, I'm a total lightweight, I rarely drink. So on our hike, I just said, I just want you to know I'm tired, I'm really dehydrated from flying, I'm really going to be backing off, tonight. And they said, sure, okay, So we went to a restaurant, and the waiter came over and said, well, what can I get you? And David said, 3 tequilas right away. And that was the beginning of a really fun night. So that self-protective energy when you get anxious or when you feel a little fear. That self-protection, the root of that can be found in aversion, some form of blame, anger, judgment, some form of greed or wanting it different than how it is, or just not being in touch with what's really going on, that whole element of confusion or delusion. And when you practice, and you could say that meditation is really just the practice of being aware, being awake to what is. This is a reality-based practice. That when you relax and when you pay attention, you start to notice these energies of wanting, of pushing away, or confusion. And you notice how they're at play all the time. And it's a really interesting element when you think about the times in your life when you've been really content, really, really happy. Most probably in those moments, these 3 energies of greed, hatred, and delusion, they weren't there. So it's the absence of these states that allow this arising of contentment, of happiness, of equanimity, of insight, of joy. And it's an interesting way to look at practice, that it's not so much about a striving toward enlightenment out there, as opposed to just noticing what's between you and feeling free right now. Noticing what's between you and feeling happy right now. It was Rilke, I think, who said, do not seek love, just seek to address the barriers to love. That's where the practice is. So desire is a big, big piece around how our life gets set in motion. So I freely and happily admit that I'm a geek. I love design and products that are cool and interesting. I think part of the root of my interest in design and so forth is because of the size of my body. For most of my life, if I was looking for clothes and I found anything that remotely fit me, I would just buy it. You can relate. And then one day I looked in my closet and I saw that I had ill-fitting clothes in colors I didn't like. So I think that set in motion my interest in design. But one of my obsessions is traveling light. As the saying goes, wherever you go, there you are. Your luggage is another story. So I traveled for 3 weeks with just one bag, just a little bit smaller than regulation size. And I could give a whole talk on that. I'll try to hold myself back. The temperature range was about 80 degrees down to about 32 and raining. So my basic strategy for traveling is, if I'm wearing everything I own for the coldest weather, I'm fine. And so I basically just traveled with 2 shirts and a pair of pants and 2 pair of underwear, 2 pair of socks, and did a lot of laundry. Now, I get really excited about how light, how stealth can I travel. And my wife doesn't share my obsession. So we get in these little arguments, where I say, look, I'm twice your size. 1 pair of my pants is 3 pair of pants for you, One of my shirts is a trench coat for you. What's the problem? I really like being able to walk through, TSA with 1 bag and not have to wait at a luggage carousel. So I pleaded with her. I said, look, I'll wash your clothes, let's just try it. But she was doing a lot of teaching in London and Paris and had her concerns. But it really bugged me, that she wanted more than 1 bag. And I realized I was attached. I was attached to my non-attachment. So ultimately we worked it out. She had 2 bags. Technically 3, but it all worked out. I actually had 2 bags, but the 1 bag has to fit inside the other bag. So it's an interesting thing to see how desire runs our lives. When you're in conflict with another person, basically you have conflicting desires. One person has a desire for one outcome, the other person has a desire for another outcome. And the question, of course, is, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? So when you think of a conflict, when you're in conflict with someone, you can sense how desire runs the conflict. And the competing desires is the source of the conflict. And whoever can begin to relax their clinging to desire begins to shift the conflict. Marshall Rosenberg, in his wonderful work in nonviolent communication, has as one of the major premises of his work is that the universe is abundant enough where we can all get our needs met. We have to really pause and really identify what is the source of that desire. And from the perspective of Buddhist psychology, desire sets the whole dance of your life in motion. There's a whole beautiful teaching called dependent co-arising, which I'll be diving into in another talk, because it helps to demonstrate how we generate our suffering through desire. But simply, it's the concept of a wheel. There's sort of a wheel of karma, a wheel of action and reaction. And what dependent co-arising, not codependent arising, dependent co-arising really says there's nothing that's independent from anything else except for nirvana or liberated insight. But it's the sense of the I, of who you are, thinking that is permanent and stable. That's the illusion. And when in truth, nothing is permanent, nothing is substantial. There's no unique individual self in the nature of becoming and existence. But when you act from the I and from the ego, it drives forward this cycle of always becoming something. And when you begin to recognize there's this dance of ongoing desire and the innate conditioning of desire that perpetuates itself, when you recognize that, you can begin to step off the wheel. And again, you can begin to sense who you are in the absence of desire. There's a quality of freedom. There are choices that become available to you that weren't available before when you were driven by this strong egoic desire. There's so much to explore in this particular teaching, but it has practical implications. And basically, it's really the third noble truth, that whatever you're holding on to, you can let go. So this leads to the practice of letting go. The practice of actively exploring what it means to not be attached. When you travel, there's a lot of letting go. So in my travels, it was very much riding the horse in the direction it's already going. Out of the 21 days, I think it rained for 18. I was there for the floods in Paris, which was kind of cool to see. There were little windows of clear space, which, so we made the most out of those. And I actually found I really like hiking in 40-degree weather. It's actually quite pleasant. At one point, the skies cleared for a day, so we took the train up to Jungfrau, which is the highest point in Europe. And rather than this is where they shot all the James Bond movies, So rather than do the touristy stuff, we did a 2-hour hike out to a hut. And the sun came out, kind of blazing sun. And while we were wearing hats, there was so much reflective light that we didn't bring sunblock, and we got unbelievably burned. So we both surrendered to the natural face peel experience. And traveling back home became an opportunity to practice letting go. After leading a wonderful retreat with 200 people in central Holland, we took the train. We got back to Amsterdam and had just one night, and the next morning we had our flights to head back. And I woke up about 6:30 and checked my phone and got a text saying, "Your flight has been canceled," without really any suggestion as to what's next. I'm hesitant to say the name of the airline, but it rhymes with Schmunited. So suddenly there was this flurry of how are we going to get back? And we found another flight, but it was really, really close to that time. And we didn't know the train schedule, and so I downloaded the Uber app and signed up for Uber and tried to figure out the name of the street, which I couldn't pronounce, et cetera, et cetera. Well, we finally made it to the airport. They kind of ushered us through. We ended up, instead of flying directly to D.C., we flew to Newark. And our flight there was delayed, and then delayed, and then delayed, and then canceled. So suddenly, Amtrak. And so we signed up for Amtrak and figured out how to get to Amtrak. And on our way to, we had to get there fast. And during the course of our trip, I was doing a lot of photography and doing some time-lapse photography of, these incredible clouds in Switzerland and along the hiking trails. And I thought, this will be fun. I'll do a time-lapse of Tara running at top speed, toward the Amtrak thing. And so I'm following her, and I'm doing this really cool time-lapse. It was really, really neat. And then suddenly, I heard someone yelling at me. And I stopped, and I turned. It was two policemen. And they said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm just doing the time-lapse thing I've been shooting." I said, "Do you realize you're in a restricted area and you have just filmed a TSA?" And I realized we weren't out of security. And meanwhile, the clock is ticking to get to our train. And I realized this is the direction the horse is already going. So we went through the whole process, and he looked at all my photographs and saw that I had done like 10 other time lapses, and I went into surrender mode, and he let us go, which was nice. The interesting thing about that entire day, what was to be basically an 8-hour flight, took 24 hours. And it was fine. There was just something about the decision of this is what it is. And so we got to see this beautiful sunset on Amtrak, on our way back. And it was such an interesting experience of just letting it be. Just letting it be. It became its own adventure. And this becomes a very interesting element to explore, is how do we let go of what we're holding on to? And there's a very interesting distinction between letting it go and letting it be. Letting it go implies that the situation, you've let go of the situation. But letting it be is like, well, this is the situation, but I'm just gonna let it be. So I'd like to lead a little reflection, if you like, to kind of explore something you might like to investigate along the realms of letting it be. So if you'd like, you can close your eyes. And if you like, you might just bring into mind something that you can feel is bugging you. Some complaint, something you might be kind of holding on to. Just take a few moments to go through the files. Just select one thing you'd like to explore for a few minutes. And if you need a little more time, just raise your hand to come up with a topic or an issue. And then again, if you need a little more time, raise your hand. Okay, what you might begin to do, just to get a little more familiar with this situation, is to investigate a little bit more fully. If there's a visual representation, an image or a little videotape you might play. If there's any auditory information, any words or tone of voice or sounds. And now primarily to begin to explore, as you think about this particular issue, what does it feel like inside? What does it feel like to hold on, to hold it tightly? Can you locate that on the inside? And you might explore just through the following questions. What would this situation be like if you weren't attached? What would it feel like inside if it wasn't an issue? What would this be like if you were free of the anxiety or the expectations you have regarding this issue? And an interesting question, if you were to let this go, what would you have to feel? And is it possible to bring to this a quality of empathy or compassion or kindness? And as you do so, how does it move or shift or change? And can you sense, is there a distinction here between letting it go and letting it be? So you might let your breath deepen just a little bit. If you like, you can let your eyes open. So in the four elemental truths of this practice, we recognize that stress and suffering happen. That stress and suffering have a cause, and it has to do with holding on. And that we can let go. And there are teachings and practices that can allow us to cultivate a greater sense of happiness through the letting go process. So much of our practice is about letting go or letting be. And recognizing what arises and simply asking, can I let this be? One of the things I always appreciate when I travel is just how much stuff we have in our culture. We were sitting in the Newark airport for 5 hours, and there were two couples that kind of sat next to us. They were talking about their travel, and one of them said, "So what did you pack?" And one said, "Well, 14 shirts, 4 pair of jeans, and you know those capris I love? I couldn't decide what color, so I brought them all." I wanted to lean in and say, "Can I tell you about the miracle properties of merino wool?" But I didn't do that. But we have so much stuff. I lived in a motorhome for 3 years, traveling and teaching, and really enjoyed just the few things I had. And when I bought a house up in New England, because I traveled around North America so much and stayed with so many people, I really got to see that most of us in our homes have enough for at least 2 houses. So as an experiment, I resolved when I bought this house, I'm not going to buy anything. I'm just going to put out the word that I have an empty house. And in 3 days, I had a fully stocked house. It was pretty cool. It made it really easy when I moved out, because I just said, come and get your stuff. And if you don't want it, I just told other people, do you want some stuff? Come and get it. So the practice is about letting go. Letting go of what you're holding on to. Letting go of what feels tight. Letting go of what feels restrictive. And letting go is not necessarily easy, but there's incredible fruit in letting go. The classic phrase from Ajahn Chah is, you let go a little, you'll have a little bit of freedom. And you let go a lot, you'll have a lot of freedom. So traveling or going on a meditation retreat is an incredible way to help evaluate one's life. I always feel different after intensive practice or after travel. And so then the question becomes, well, what do I want? And as I kind of enter back into my life, I want to continue to simplify. I'm inspired by simplifying. I want to be more present for the people in my life. I want to serve with more heart and more compassion. I want to develop more skills, be more skillful in how I contribute. I want to explore more creativity. And from this trip, I think I have an idea of a book that I'd like to write. So these desires arise, but then I ask myself, well, wait a minute, aren't these attachments? Do I want to write a book, or do I want to have written a book? Big difference. Big difference. So how do you sort out intention from attachment? I love this line. This line from Werner Erhard, who was the founder of EST, has been such an operative little sutta or sutra for me in my life. He said, if nothing means anything, including this statement, what do you want? For me, when I have a desire, it's so helpful to track back the desire, to get in touch with the source of the desire. I really think that's key. Why would I want to do photography in an exhibit? Why would I want to write a book? Why do I want to simplify? If I can get back to 3 things, clarity begins to emerge. And that, for me, is the sincerity behind the desire, the purity of the desire, and releasing attachment to the outcome. So with my photography, am I the next Ansel Adams? I don't think so. Maybe. But if I'm attached to the results, it's going to choke off my creativity. With my desire, my intention to be of service in the world, am I going to release all beings from their suffering? Probably not. But still, there's a sincerity in that desire. So reflecting on what you want in your life and tracking back that desire, whether it comes from the place of ego, of self-inflation, or whether it comes from a place of sincerity, can be a powerful, powerful distinction. Let's do a short little reflection on this, if you don't mind. So again, with your eyes closed, you might deepen your breath. And you might reflect on this statement. If nothing means anything, including this statement, what do you want in your life? Can you sense the deepest sincerity that informs your desires? Can you sense the purity of the desires that motivate you in your life? And can you imagine acting toward your desires while releasing attachment to the outcome? And simply being free in the pursuit of what calls you in the moment. And again, you can deepen the breath and let your eyes open. So non-attachment can be a beautiful place of freedom. When you can act without clinging to the results of your actions, there's freedom. True freedom. So non-attachment is a wonderful thing to aspire to, but it's important to recognize what are called the near enemies. And there are certain near enemies of non-attachment to be aware of. They kind of look like non-attachment, but they're not. And they are, number one, indifference. It's easy to feel indifferent toward the world and call that non-attachment. The second one is apathy. Apathy kind of looks like it, but it's not. And the third is emotional detachment. Emotional detachment, very, very close, but it's not it. It's easy to defer to indifference, apathy, and emotional detachment. When we see people suffering, we can sit back and say, good, maybe they're going to learn their lesson now. But something gets closed off. What we're cultivating in the practice is wisdom, the capacity to see clearly, but also compassion, to have our hearts open at the same time, where we can both see the lessons we all have to learn through our suffering, and yet keep our hearts open to empathy and compassion. So non-attachment gives you space, it gives you distance from what's happening. And the near enemy of attachment is detachment, that indifference, that non-caring. But what's possible is to both feel the space of non-attachment and also touch into the immeasurable qualities of the heart. So perhaps we can close with a short meditation on this. In Buddhist practice, this is referred to as bodhicitta, awakened heart and awakened mind. So you might, just in these remaining minutes, let your attention again come back to the breath. And you might explore this paradox. Just in these moments, who are you in the absence of desire? In the absence of desire, there can arise a quality of contentment, of this moment is enough. Nothing to add, nothing to take away. And you might sense arising in this space these 4 qualities of the awakened heart. This radiance of the heart toward yourself and also to all beings. The experience of compassion. The experience of kindness. Your capacity for joy. And your capacity for equanimity, a quality of steadiness in the midst of all that changes. In these final moments, you might just feel the breath. Feel the spaciousness that arises through releasing attachment to any outcome. And sensing the radiance of the moment and the heart. If there's anyone in particular in your life who may be struggling, you might draw them into your heart and mind and offer them your well-wishing. And in these final moments, if you wish, offering a prayer for your journey. And as you're ready, deepening the breath. And letting your eyes open. Thank you for your kind listening. It's fun to give a talk on non-attachment and try to release any attachment to it being any good. 2 quick announcements. One is in regard to parking. There's more and more of an issue of not enough parking. So some people feel inspired to park in areas that aren't fully designated as parking. And the Arlington police are concerned because it's blocking fire lanes. So we'd like to kind of bring that into your awareness, so to kind of avoid any kind of ticketing or anything like that. So if you're parking somewhere that's not a designated parking space, it's probably not a parking space. So you can park all through the neighborhood. You won't be ticketed if you park in the streets around the lot here. And also just to let you know that Tara and I are doing a day-long retreat on conscious relationships on July 30th. So a little heads up on that. Not required you come with someone. We're just exploring the general topic of relationships. However, if there's someone you want to come with, you'll find it to be applicable. I guarantee it. Thanks so much for your support for the church and for me. If you want to be on the mailing list, you can sign up in the back. And may you and your non-attachment have a wonderful evening together. I think we have tea and cookies as well. Thank you.